Hi guys, welcome back to the Darkness and Veils podcast. Just want to say quickly before we just get into this podcast, there's a massive thank you to each and every one of you who's tuned in over the last couple of weeks. It's recently new here, we're recently new on YouTube. I hope you guys are really enjoying the episodes. Any feedback is great. But yeah, just thank you guys. Your support's been absolutely amazing. Now tonight's episode is a little bit different. We haven't got a guest on tonight, so we've had a man that you may know by the name of Simon Entwistle. Now he is great at the stories of the Pendle Witches, the famous trial of 1612, where these women were accused of being witches and they were executed and found guilty of witchcraft. Whether that's true or not, that still remains to be seen. But however, going back to Simon Entwistle, the way he tells this story is it's you just listen to it, guys. Honestly, it's his voice. He gets well into the story. The storytelling is magnificent. But he's also a tour guide at Pendle. If any of you guys from the UK want to go over there, head over, get in touch with Simon and, possibly ask him what his tours are like. I'm sure he's got it on his website and you can go and visit that. But guys, yeah, we're going to get into this story now, and you're going to hear Simon's voice. You're going to listen to the story of the Pendle Witches, which is absolutely fascinating. Yeah, just listen. Take a listen, guys.
In 1603, we lost one of our most famous queens, Queen Elizabeth I. She led by example, loved by the people of England, and many people believe that she was probably our finest ever monarch. However, when she died, she was replaced by a completely different character called King James VI of Scotland, who then became King James I of England. This man was absolutely paranoid about witchcraft. He not only believed that witches existed, he believed that witches were out to get him. He blamed witchcraft and Catholicism as being exactly the same. He blamed the gunpowder plot of 1605 on witchcraft, and indeed witchcraft being very allied to the Catholic faith. He wrote a book called the Demonology Book, and if you read the book very clearly, it does point out his views against the Catholics and indeed witchcraft. Caught up in all this hysteria were a group of people that would go down in history as the Pendle Witches. They lived beneath the shadow of Pendle Hill in East Lancashire, in an area known simply as the Forest of Pendle. What made two of them quite unique is that two of them were over 85 years old. They'd somehow defied the laws of nature. We are told at that period of time that life expectancy would be 35 if you're lucky, but these two women had somehow defied the laws of nature. One was called Anne Whittle, commonly known as Bessie Chattox. The other, Elizabeth Southern, commonly known as Demdike. Both women had a hatred towards each other, and they certainly didn't trust each other. It's said that both were actually experts in herbal remedies. It's also said that one day Anne Whittle broke into the home of Elizabeth Southern, a little cottage called Malkin Tower, and stole items of clothing and a bag of grain. There was no love between them. Also, Elizabeth Southern was convinced that Anne Whittle had somehow cursed her husband, John Device, and blamed her entirely for his death. Now, living at Malkin Tower with Elizabeth Southern was her daughter, Elizabeth Devise. She had 3 children, James, Alison, Jeanette Devise. They all lived in this one-roomed limestone hovel beneath the shadow of Pendle Hill, called Malkin Tower, which sounds grand, doesn't it? But it wouldn't have been. Remember, there's no hospitals, there's no dentists, there's no supermarkets. You couldn't just pop out and buy a Mars bar. You lived off the land. It was a very, very tough life. Way back in the 18th of March 1612, Alison Devise, she's the granddaughter of Elizabeth Southern, and she had a walk along the length of Pendle. She made her way down towards the market town of Cone on what we call the Trawden Road, and had the misfortune of meeting a Halifax peddler called John Law. When I say peddler, John Law was basically a walking salesman. A large pack in his back full of 1612 luxuries, like combs, mirrors, other items. And he would go from village to village, selling his wares. He was also a bit like a walking newspaper, really. Alison had a confrontation with him. "Oh, please, sir, you can spare just a few pins to pin my clothing together, sir. Get away with you, I'm not taking me pack off for you, lass, said John Law. Get away with you, lass. Please, sir, you can spare just a couple of pins, sir. Get away with you. According to John Law, the Halifax peddler, out of the mist, out of the heather, appeared a huge black dog with snarling white teeth and glowing red eyes. The dog sat next to Alison, and the dog talked. Alison, I can lame him for you. Lame him, she screamed. Law felt this terrible pain in his left arm and left leg, and collapsed in agony on the Cone to Trawden Road. The kind people of Cone could see him. They got a stretch team together, and they carried him into an old alehouse in Cone that has long since gone, called the Greyhound Inn. There the landlord, John Edrington, spoon-fed him, cleaned him, and as Law's voice returned, Law shouted, I've been cursed! There's a witch in the forest, a young lass with a dog. I swear to you, I heard the dog talk. She's in league with devil. Send letters back to my family. A series of letters was sent back to Halifax to John Law's home, and John Law's eldest son Abraham received the first letter. Hey, me father's in trouble. Better go and collect him. He set off from Halifax, arrived in Cone, walked into the old Greyhound Inn, and saw his father in a twisted and contorted state. Father, what's happened to you, man? You look terrible. Abraham, I met a young lass in the forest of Pendle with a dog. The dog talked. She's in league with devil. She's cursed me, lass. She's a witch. I want you to go and find her, bring her here, reverse the curse. Abraham must have been quite a brave lad. He made his way for the forest of Pendle, for the twisting pathways, and came across this little cottage called Malkin Tower. Hammered on the door. The door opened. There was James Devise. I want to see Alison Devise. Where is she? In here, sir. Alison came to the door. Right, lass, you're coming with me. Against her wishes, against her will, she was dragged through the forest of Pendle, down into the market town of Cone, and into the old Greyhound Inn, where she made eye contact with John Law, the Halifax peddler. Law looked up from his sick bed. It's you! You're a witch! You cursed me last, didn't you? That dog you had! I heard it talk! You're in league with devil, aren't you? This 14-year-old girl, on bended knees, begged and begged and begged forgiveness. She had no idea. She'd just confessed to a state capital offence of witchcraft. And strange enough, John Law, the Halifax peddler, was about to forgive her, but not his son Abraham. Oh no, we'll have you for this. I'm going to go and get magistrates. Now, the local magistrate was called Roger Nowell. He was in charge of the whole area known as the Forest of Pendle. He also had his book of demonology, was fully aware of the king's paranoia, and also he knew if he could incriminate this young girl, he was going to curry favour with the King of England personally. So therefore, Alison is arrested. She's brought to Reed Hall, Burnley, where for the second time inside 24 hours, she bursts into tears and begs forgiveness. She gave Roger Nowell a lot more information. My grandmother Demdike, she's a witch. So's Bessie Chattox and her daughter Anne Redfern. We have familiars, sir. Familiars, said Roger Nowell. Yes, sir, dogs. Tib, Bull, Fancy, Dandy. They belong to the four of us, sir. They came to at different times of our lives and said, look, we can give you special powers, but in return we need to suckle from your flesh and take your souls. But also, we make clay pictures, sir. Clay pictures, said Roger Nowell. Yes, sir, dolls made of clay, with human teeth and human hair, sir. The dogs then tell us to curse certain people, sir. We then crumble the clay picture over the fire, sir, and people die, sir. Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, was actually delighted. He wasn't scared. He was delighted, and gave orders to the sheriffs of the forest, Hargreaves and Proctor, to bring Demdike, Chattox and Redfern straight to Reed Hall, Burnley, where young Alison was also detained. When this group met, a huge argument erupted. Remember, there is no love between Elizabeth Southern, Demdike, and Anne Whittle, Bessie Chattox. They tried to blame each other. The room was full of shouting and swearing, as the four of them unwittingly, actually, through trying to blame the next person, all admitted to witchcraft. They are sent from Reed Hall, Burnley, to the city of Lancaster, where they are thrown into what we call the Well Tower, this very, very deep underground dungeon, where not even a chink of light can get down to them. There they are chained to the floor in appalling, dark, pitch-black conditions. In the meantime, on the slopes of Pendle Hill, Elizabeth Devise is very worried about her mother, Demdike. She is very, very worried about her daughter, Alison, and she organises on Good Friday what has gone down in history as the Good Friday meeting that took place at the little stone cottage, Malkin Tower, deep in the forest of Pendle. Alison's brother James Devise slaughtered the sheep from the fell, and they dined on fresh mutton. They then got a large cooking vessel called a cauldron and lit a fire beneath it. The whole idea of this potion was to get a potion together to blow the gates of Lancaster City Castle open and rescue their loved ones and murder Mr. Thomas Cavell, the governor. But nothing happened. What did happen is word reached the ears of Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, and he gave orders that every single person who had attended the Good Friday meeting should be arrested immediately. When word filtered into the forest of Pendle, 3 people thought, there's no way we're going to hang around. Christopher Howgate and his wife Barbara disappeared. They made their way into the forest of Pendle and into the West Riding of Yorkshire, and in doing so, saved their lives. The people that were successfully arrested from being at the Good Day Friday meeting was indeed none other than Jeanette Preston of Gisborne, West Yorkshire. Elizabeth Devise, James and Alison Devise, Anne Redfern, Alice Nutter, Catherine Hewitt, John and Jane Bulcock, Margaret Pearson from Padiham, and from Salisbury, Jeanette Brearley, Ellen Brearley, Jane Southworth, John Ramsden, Elizabeth Astley, Isabel Sidegross, Lawrence Hay, and from Windle, Isabel Roby. Because Jeanette Preston came from Gisborne, West Yorkshire, she was sent to the city of York. There she was paraded in front of the York City magistrates. Her husband went with her and begged for her release. Villagers went with her and begged for her release. But the jury were convinced that she was heavily involved in witchcraft. She had been on trial before in York, so therefore they were very, very suspicious of her. She was found guilty of the murder of her employer, Mr. Thomas Lister. She'd been nursing him. He had died. She wrapped his body in a clean white sheet ready for burial, and 2 days before the burial, she touched the sheet, and some fresh blood came from the sheet, and she was therefore found guilty of his murder by witchcraft, and became the very, very first of the Pendle witches to be executed in the city of York on the 27th of July, 1612. The others are being held at Lancaster. Apart from the other Jeanette, the youngest of the Devise family, it has been said, never confirmed or denied, but we do know that she was not sent to Lancaster City Castle with her grandmother Demdike, her mother Elizabeth, her brother James, and sister Alison. Some people believe that she may have indeed been sent to live with the local magistrate, Roger Nowell, where for the first time in her life she would have 3 meals a day, a lovely warm bed to sleep in, and also nice clothes to wear. Roger Nowell writes to the King of England personally. The King is absolutely delighted and sends 2 circuit judges, James Altham from the City of London, Edmund Bromley from the City of London, Thomas Potts from the City of London, and that is why we are here today, because in 1613 he is going to write a book called The Wonderfull Discoverie of Witches in Lancashire, which would help with royalties. A lot of those royalties went to Thomas Keivett, who actually stopped the gunpowder plot, actually caught Guy Fawkes red-handed, and a lot of the royalties went to him. So I think it's fair to say that Thomas Potts was very, very close to the king and indeed the Protestant causes. So the trials began in the city of Lancaster in August 1612. Old Demdike, as we know her, Elizabeth Southern, actually died before the trials began. But her granddaughter, little Jeanette Devise, was brought into court and placed on top of her desk by Roger Nowell so the jury could see her. And there she started to tell the courts about these dogs, Tib, Ball, Fancy, Dandy, that had all arrived at Malkin Tower, how she'd seen them suckle from the flesh of Demdike and Chattox, and how these dogs had talked and told them to select certain victims. Her mother Elizabeth was in court that day, and her mother shouted, "Stop it, Jeanette! You don't know what you're saying! Stop it!" "Have my mother removed from the court, sir. She's embarrassing me, sir." Because Demdike has died, the accusations against her are actually recognised by her granddaughter, and she told the court how she was responsible for the death of Richard Assheton of Downham, the child of Richard Baldwin of Burnley, and Henry Mitten of Roughlee. Of course, because she's dead, she can't testify, and the jury believe this little girl could not be manipulated. Then, up from the cells, came Chattox. Her real name was Anne Whittle. She was in a terrible, terrible state of health. In fact, Potts referred to her as a skeleton in rags. There she is found guilty of the murder of Robert Nutter, John Devise, Anne Nutter, John Moore, and Hugh Moore by witchcraft, by having a dog called Fancy that gave her special powers. She is in such a terrible state of health, she can't either plead guilty or not guilty, but is found guilty by the courts, and also the star witness, little Jeanette Devise. Then came Catherine Hewitt. She came from Cone, and she is found guilty of the murder of Anne Fowles. Her friend Alice Gray, also from Cone, is one of the most luckiest people that day because they can't find any evidence against her, and she is released. Then came Elizabeth Devise. She was known really as Squinting Lizzie. When I looked up, when I looked down, and she again was in a terrible, terrible state of health. There she is found guilty on the evidence of her own daughter, little Jeanette Devise, of the murder of John Robinson, James Robinson, and also Henry Mitten as well. Then came James Devise. Now, James is in a really, really bad state of health. In fact, the jury wonder whether he's actually been tortured. He has bruising on his face. He is in such a bad state of health that two warders have to actually hold him up to stop him from falling. He's in an appalling state of health. There, he is found guilty of the murder of Anne Townley, John Hargreaves, Blaise Hargreaves, and John Duckworth by witchcraft. He's in such a bad state of health that he more or less admits to these murders by witchcraft. He also tells the court, if you go to Malkin Tower and start digging, you'll find clay pictures. Apparently these clay pictures were brought into court and used as evidence against him, but he's more or less self-incriminating himself, along with his younger sister, Jeanette. Then came Anne Redfern, the daughter of Anne Whittle. She is found guilty of aiding the murder of Christopher Nutter by witchcraft. The courts believe that a little girl cannot be manipulated, and they believed every single word that little Jeanette Devise said. The Pendle Witches are all executed on the 20th of August, along with John and Jane Bulcock, and mother and son, farmers from Blacko, and by far the most famous of all those Pendle Witches, the most amazing Alice Nutter. What we do know is, again, the little girl Jeanette Devise pointed out John and Jane Bulcock and Alice Nutter as being at the Good Friday meeting. The judges were rather concerned about Alice because she was actually a noble woman. Apparently she could read and write, and she lived in a lovely, lovely, gorgeous house known simply as Roughlee Old Hall. However, they had an identity parade and they mixed other prisoners with her, and they also mentioned to young Jeanette, was a Jane Doe there? I know of no such person, said Jeanette, and she pointed out where John and Jane had sat at the Good Friday meeting, along with Alice Nutter. They made pleas of not guilty, but in the case of Alice, she was found guilty of aiding Demdike and Alison Devise in the murder of Henry Mitten of Roughlee because he wouldn't give them a penny. In the case of John and Jane, they were found guilty of turning a young girl called Jean Mead of Harrogate completely insane by witchcraft. Again, on the evidence of the little girl, they were found guilty of witchcraft. They were all executed 20th of August 1612 in front of huge crowds in the city of Lancaster. We do know that James Altham was knighted, Edmund Bromley was knighted, Thomas Potts wrote his book, The Wonderfull Discovery of Witches in Lancashire, which would earn him a fortune. Roger Nowell was also mentioned in dispatches, along with William Holden and John Bannister, two other local magistrates from the area. The Pendle story is a very sad story, but also, due to Thomas Potts' book, The Wonderfull Discovery, is well documented. We do know that little Jeanette Devise survived because 3 years later she's arrested on a charge of witchcraft. Of course, with her family reputation, this is taken very, very seriously. A young boy called Edmund Robinson said he saw her commit acts of witchcraft in the forest of Pendle. Of course, the reputation is taken very seriously. She is arrested. She's sent to Lancaster, stripped naked, looked for marks on her body. Down to the city of London, the same thing happens again, then back up north again. And after 2.5 years of travelling up and down the country, this young boy Robinson said, "Actually, I made it all up. I didn't see her do anything." So you could say that witchcraft, or the superstition surrounding it, absolutely destroyed that young girl's life. And of course, her entire family. To this very day, the forest of Pendle has all gone, but Pendle Hill still stands proudly between Nelson, Cone and Clitheroe, and still has a magic about it.
Wow, there you have it, guys. Simon Entwistle, what a storyteller. Honest to God, fantastic story. And, you know, Simon, if you're watching this, I appreciate it. Thank you for sending that over for me to share to the viewers. I'm hoping to get Simon on in the new year to go a little bit into the background of the story and, you know, get his view on things. But that story was just absolutely fascinating. And thank you once again, Simon, for sharing that with us. And thank you. But yeah, guys, if you like this episode, please, you know, just show some love on it. It will be on YouTube, it will be on Spotify, it'll be out there, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I just want to say once again, thank you very much for everybody that has viewed, watched, liked,